TheBlaze Radio Network. On demand.
Hi, it's Stu. Welcome to the podcast. I don't know if you happen to notice this. Didn't seem like the media did. The Obama administration is now confirmed to have made payments to a known terrorist group. And, you know, I know they're not in power anymore, but I still feel like that one's worth looking back on.
Why? Why are you still harping on Obama? Okay, so he gave a whole bunch of taxpayer money to, you know, a known terrorist organization.
Yeah, well, that seems like a big deal to me.
Can we please talk about the real issue? Donald Trump and how he's in bed with Russia. We suppose he might be maybe a KGB agent. We have no evidence of it, but we should discuss it.
That was like 12 disclaimers at the same in the same sentence.
Doesn't make it less important.
We did get into this a little bit, Trump derangement syndrome. What they're talking about, this is an actual thing now, where people are having real mental effects, apparently, about how much they don't like Trump. Which is a little strange.
Remember they used to say to us, just get over it? Get over it, he's president.
Yeah. Well, that was we didn't talk about this today, but Steve Bannon said that, like, to the Koch brothers. Just get on board the train. Like, when has that approach ever worked for anyone who's not 5 years old?
Well, I tell you very well. It worked very, very well.
I mean, again, unless you have, like, some force relationship with whoever you're telling.
Yes.
Which I don't think
rapists.
Steve Bannon can't even stay in the White House. Like, he can't even. He's a zilch. Anyway, so you have that. You have and the slippery slope where this goes, because the discussion was largely more about postmodernism and the way that that's changing us, and it's you got to hear that. Also, the idea that gender stereotyping, that's going away. The BBC's going to inform us on that.
There is no boy or girl.
And we have a new. We got Tom Cruise. We talk about that, and the new drug for. The program apparently started to endorse today.
Yes, apparently we were endorsing a new drug. And
there you go.
Strangely kind of conflicted about that endorsement.
Yes, but we can't change it now because it's already happened. Here's the podcast.
Glenn Beck.
Was the Obama administration the toughest administration on terrorism? That's the line the left and the media has wanted us to swallow. You know, forget about supporting the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, the founders of modern-day jihadism. And also, let's forget about giving the world's leading state sponsor of terror, Iran, $400 million in cash on a pallet at the Tehran airport. Let's forget about those little hiccups, because after all, he killed bin Laden. I think he did it with his own hands. Here's the President Obama, back in 2011 on the state of al-Qaeda. Listen.
By the time we found bin Laden, al-Qaeda's agenda had come to be seen by the vast majority of the region as a dead end. And the people of the Middle East and North Africa had taken their future into their own hands.
The people of Africa. So let me just make sure I have this right. In other words, their leader was dead and the movement was dying. So let's accept that as true. Mr. President, if that was true, if you had them on the ropes and this was all but a one battle, why was your administration giving money to al-Qaeda's global finance network? This is a story that is a little underreported on the left and the mainstream media. The story goes back 14 years. The U.S. Treasury Department had caught a group called the Islamic Relief Agency red-handed. They were raising funds in support of jihadists. They had branches all over the world, including the Middle East and Africa, Western Europe, and even here in the United States. They were responsible for channeling over $1.2 million to Iraqi insurgents fighting U.S. soldiers in Iraq. They were also found guilty of raising more than $5 million for Osama bin Laden. The Islamic Relief Agency was designated as a terror financing organization. Now, you'd think that story would stop after that, right? But it doesn't. 10 years after they were designated as terror financiers, the Obama administration approved a $200,000 grant for them to do work in Africa. An NGO had contracted them to do work in Sudan. When the NGO mentioned that this contracted group might be on the terror list, the Obama administration then paused the deal. Now, here's where it gets weird. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt for a second. It's possible somebody within the Obama administration screwed up, the application process and just didn't check to see if this group was on the terror list. That's incredibly dangerous and incompetent, but at least it's understandable. But here's what I can't understand. At this point, everyone involved knows about the Islamic Relief Agency and what they're involved in. They know that they have given money to Osama bin Laden. They know they're on the terrorist list. But knowing all of that, they still agreed to pay them $125,000. That's over $100,000 of your tax money that was given to known terrorists. How did this happen? Well, that was our question over the weekend. There's one U.S. government agency at the center of all of this. And boy, do they have a strange knack for being directly in the middle of some of the darkest and most secret things our government is involved in. It's disgraceful, it's disgusting, it's dangerous, and it's still going on. See who I'm talking about tonight on TV on TheBlaze.com.
It's Monday, July 30th. You're listening to the Glenn Beck Program.
Good morning, Stu. How are you?
Fine, Glenn. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, that's what I do.
I'm always amazed by when you say something like $150,000 went to a known terrorist group. I always like to think about that as, for most people, that's like more tax dollars than they'll ever contribute. So you will go through your entire life paying taxes. And maybe, it's a couple $100,000 for your entire life. All your work, your entire life, all the money you ever gave to the government just went to a terrorist group. Congratulations, you win.
We are so screwed up. There's a story out of Texas today where they are now talking about renaming the city of Austin. They have already renamed 7 streets that they deemed worthy of immediate action. And they now want to rename the city of Austin. Now, Stephen F. Austin is known here in Texas as the father of Texas. He is the namesake of Austin. He's the guy who carved out the early outlines of Texas. He is also the guy who opposed an attempt by Mexico to ban slavery in a province called Tejas. So he said if the slaves were free, they would turn into vagabonds, a nuisance, and a menace. So we've got to change the name of Austin now. This is what the city of Austin is doing. They are just rewriting history. They're just erasing. How do you do that? How do you do that? Who is oppressed by the name Austin? It's a progressive utopia. It is becoming the San Francisco of Texas. Thank you, California. And now they're claiming that in this progressive utopia, they're so oppressed. How? You took over the city. How are you oppressed? And so now they have to change our history. Over the weekend, I was recording the audiobook for the new book that's coming out September 18th. It's called Addicted to Outrage. And I read this story, and I had just read this section of the book. And I want to read it to you. As we search for truth, let's first remember who we are. America's history with slavery is an abomination. Frankly, the people back then were monstrous. I mean, how could they not be? It may not have, been in their home or even their neighborhood, but they knew slavery was going on. The food they ate, the clothes they wore, the fabric, cotton was picked and made by slaves. They may not have been able to hear the lash and the crack of the whip, but all they had to do was think about it. But they refused. We should now, in this century, judge and condemn them. And it's important to do so, to set ourselves apart and signal our virtue, because just as this generation has passed judgment on past generations, we too shall be judged and condemned by our children and our children's children. They will ask, how could they have possibly cared about some entertainer who tweeted stupid stuff, or spend days going back and forth online asking, do you see a blue dress or is it a gold dress? They knew that the food that they ate and the clothes that they wore were picked and made by slaves. Or is it somehow different now? Judge the founders, and we too shall be judged. Why are we not today leading the charge to free the slaves that are currently in chains? There are more in bondage today than the entire 400-year period of Western slave trade combined. What people now say about the founders is just as true about us today. We may not be able to hear the lash and the crack of the whip, but all we have to do is Google it. Hashtag slavery is out of control. Hashtags don't count as actually doing something. I can see my ratings now, minute to minute. This is something new. And I know that every time I speak about freeing slaves in today's world, my ratings go down. I have shared the stories of the way radicals now fund their diabolical plans in organ harvesting. We have taken 2 cells off the streets when we kicked in the doors of their surgery centers in the Middle East. These are Christian Yazidi slaves and even Muslim orphans who have more value as parts than people. But people in radio and television and online beg me not to talk about it. Now, let's be really careful of asking the honest question here, because once you hear the answer, you're going to be faced with the choice. The question is, why? Why don't people want to hear it? Answer: because all of those who have been oppressed by a statue are selfish, self-centered crybabies and cowards. And quite frankly, the rest of us are too comfortable in the belief that by expressing our outrage toward those crybabies, we're doing our part. The choice is dogpile with outrage over my answer and do nothing, or do your own homework and find the truth for yourself. And instead of focusing on the crybabies, maybe we work together and lead and stop slavery today.
Glenn Beck.
I'm surprised you didn't hear this or remember that we've talked about this.
Probably
There's serious people now claiming that math is racist. And I've never understood it until I began to look into postmodernism. Now I get it. I absolutely get it.
Because to me, I would think it's self-evident that serious people are not saying math is racist. Because if you're saying math is racist, you're not a serious person. So it's impossible for a serious person to say math is racist. They're numbers.
Yeah, right. Well, serious people are saying math is racist. And here's why. Math is racist because it is math, science, reason that built the Western way of life, that built the Western world. So anything that helped build this world needs to be taken apart. Now, it may be resurrected later, but anything that helped build the Western way of life must be stopped and taken apart, because it has to be collapsed, and then it can be resurrected under a new name or a new regime or whatever. But everything that helps keep this together or helped build it has to be taken apart. That's how you get to a place where mathematics is racist. And we have to not roll our eyes at that, because there are serious people. Now, like Stu says, I don't think you're serious.
Right.
But they do. They are.
And people are taking them seriously.
And they are in serious positions of education. And so when you have the halls of education saying, no, math is racist, it will become a fact to a lot of kids. And these kids are being indoctrinated with this garbage right now. I don't know what it's going to take before we start saying, I'm not sending my kids to any of these schools. I'm not doing it. I am not doing it. My kids would be better off at a trade school. My kids would be better off without a degree and just starting to, unless they don't want to be a doctor. But I'm not sending my children through these indoctrination camps, because that is exactly what's happening in these universities.
Glenn Beck.
Let me give you an example of postmodernism in action, but you don't think of it this way. You think of it as as supporting your president or supporting your party, but it is actually postmodernism. The new poll out: $12 billion to aid farmers that have been hurt by the tariffs. Now, what is that story? The story of the aid is a bailout for a big group of people because of a tax increase. Now, Americans who are conservative should be against the big tax increase and the tariff, same thing, which caused the hurt to the farmers. We should recognize that. And then say, wait, we don't want to bail them out. That's doubling down on a bad idea. We don't want bailouts. So the government screws it up, the government bails it out. Who does that sound like? That's Democrats. That's Democrats. Right. That's a progressive idea, right? The taxes, and then because of the damage that the taxes do, you have to bail somebody out. Mm-hmm. Okay, that is the Democratic Party. $12 billion aid to farmer hurt by tariffs. Are you for or against it? In favor, 78% of Republicans. Against, 22% of Republicans. In favor, 34% of Democrats. Oppose, 66% of Democrats. Wait. Can anybody be honest? Can anyone be honest?
And I think my initial reaction to that was people are just supporting their team, right? Like the Republicans, they know that Trump's doing this. So even though they might not necessarily like the policy idea, it's less important than supporting their guy. And the same thing from the Democrats, even though they obviously love the idea of a bailout to support a tax increase. And it's like Democrat 101. But it's Trump doing it. So here they just say they don't like it because they don't like Trump.
So this is, in a way, postmodernism in action, because the Democrats should love this. Republicans should hate it. But Democrats should love it. They should love it. They don't. They don't. Why? Because it is Donald Trump. Anything to destroy Donald Trump. Why do the Republicans support this? Because it is Donald Trump, and he's destroying the mainstream media. He's destroying the old guard. So it is destruction that is making us, not reason, destruction that is making us go here. Now we can say that it is about my loyalty, but it really is about destruction. You're loyal to him because you see him kicking down the doors of power, correct? And they are opposed to him because they see him, to be honest, they see him as a jingoistic, rah America, let's make America great again. That goes against everything postmodernism is. So they have to abandon reason. The hardest thing about postmodernism, and the thing that we have to understand, otherwise we're never going to be able to even fight it. It's the same as progressivism. Until you could say, no, there is a difference between a liberal and a progressive. Until we understood that difference, it wasn't just word games. It was vitally important to understand and expose it. The same thing with postmodernism. Postmodernism. What is the modern age? The modern age is the age that was developed under science, math, reason, study, honest questioning. Fix reason firmly in her seat. That's what created the modern world. There was no magic anymore. You had to prove it scientifically. So we get to Karl Marx. And Karl Marx, what is his theory? Stu, what's his theory? That all of the workers are going to eventually what?
Unite. Workers of the world will unite, and they will come together to overthrow the evil fat cats.
Yes, they're going to overthrow capitalism and anybody who has anything, and they're all going to share. Okay. Well, we know human nature well enough to know that in the end, nobody shares. Nobody shares. If you have absolute power, you are not going to share that power, and you're not going to share your stuff, because you'll end up saying, you know, me and the rest of these guys, we're the ones doing all the work. We deserve it. And they isolate themselves, and it ends up in Venezuela. Okay. So at the turn of the century, and starting in the 1850s, people believed that the workers would rise up. And they did. That's what unions were for. And unions were, at the beginning, communist organs. That's all they were. They were trying to unite all of the workers to rise up against the evil robber barons, whether they were robber barons or not. So the unions start. Progressivism starts, because progressivism says, now this is before all the hundreds of millions of dead, progressivism says communism is the way to go. This one big state, and will unite the world. And that's really the way to go. But we don't like the revolution part. That's very un-American. Remember, you can assign some good intent here from the progressives because they didn't know at the time how it would turn out. So they say a big state and some sort of authoritarian plan is much better. And we can do it now because science is ruling. Reason, logic. So they see the revolution in Russia. They don't like the revolution in Russia, but they think that Stalin is the guy. Then Mussolini steps up to the plate, and Mussolini doesn't have a revolution. Mussolini, he takes over the state. Yes, he has some beatings in the streets with his black shirts and everything else, but it is not like the Russian Revolution. And he comes in and he takes power. Now, FDR sends his best people over to study Mussolini. FDR writes a review of the Mussolini's book on fascism and says it's great. This is the future. So all of this is happening, and then fascism falls apart. And what fascism was communism says workers of the world. But Mussolini figured out, because it was right after World War I, wait a minute, all the soldiers here, they didn't fight for all of the countries of the world. They fought for Italy. So we're going to take this communist idea and just make it a nationalist idea, because that is a better way to get everybody into a one totalitarian state. So they were both socialists and both for complete control, state-run. Well, about 1940, 45, it's all falling apart. By 1950, all of the communists see what's happening. The people in Europe have just fought against Russia and fought against fascism. And in America, we're starting to be very, very prosperous. We're exploding. And people are starting to have TVs and phones and houses and cars and 2 cars. And they realize these SOBs are not going to rise up. They're not going to rise up. They want the creature comforts. And somebody says they don't know that they've been hypnotized. Oh my gosh, this system is so evil. They're just being bought. And they don't know that they're even in slavery, and they have no idea that they are oppressed. Ding, 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 ding. The first bells of postmodernism. How do we take the West apart? How do we tell people in the West that they're all really oppressed? What they have to do is they have to start splitting us into little teeny groups. Like fascism learned, it's nationalism. But if you split it down even into smaller groups, you can divide even a country. And so we have to split everybody into their own oppressed groups, even those groups that don't think they're oppressed. They're in an oppressed group. And we can split them all apart. But then to do this, we must discredit the entire system. We have to tear it all down, because there's no way you can build anything off of the back of this system. It must be entirely new. So we have to split everybody apart. We have to show how they're oppressed. Then we need to discredit every system. We need to have riots in the streets, chaos in the streets, with no one having any idea of what is true, what is not true. And then when it burns itself down to the ground, we will come out on the other side and we will build our new utopia. That's where we are, guys. That's where we are. We're beyond the progressives. Progressives weren't the ones that wanted all of the riots in the streets. Progressives were the ones who said, I don't want revolution. I want to take it step by step. Still, their idea is one state-run government. But they didn't want revolution. Postmodernists came in and said, that is the only way to tear it entirely apart and to be as vicious and ruthless as we can possibly be. Because Americans and the people in the West, they don't even know how oppressed they really are. It's important for us to know this so we can spot it and not play into it. I told you years ago, chaos is the operative word. It is going to be the word that that historians will write about this time period. And the people did not see the chaos that was being inflicted upon them, i.e. China, i.e. Russia. They did not see the chaos that was being inflicted on them, nor did they see the chaos that they were furthering and spreading themselves. We cannot be agents of chaos. We must, if we're going to preserve not just the country anymore, this is bigger than our country now. If we are going to preserve the Western way of life, we must again to use reason and logic and science and, dare I say, faith, at least in one another.
Glenn Beck.
Russia currently appears more interested in hacking the U.S. electrical grid than interfering with our midterm elections. Oh, well, that's a relief. Last week, the Department of Homeland Security confirmed that Russian military intelligence has been hacking into the control rooms of power plants all across the U.S., and they've been doing it for the past year. Shouldn't we have, shouldn't this been on TV a little bit? Just a little bit. So far, they appear to have stopped short of trying to take remote control of the plants, which they did in the Ukraine in 2015. But U.S. intelligence officials interviewed by the New York Times say that Homeland Security has, quote, understated the scope of the threat, end quote. Yes, it's our power plants. That would, President Trump was briefed Friday on U.S. cybersecurity efforts to protect the midterm election systems. Some believe Russian hackers may just be, biding their time, waiting to attack the election systems closer to Election Day. Last week, Microsoft announced at a security conference that it had stopped an attack on congressional offices in late 2017. Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill says her office was one of the ones attacked unsuccessfully. She is on the Senate Armed Service Committee, and one official says Russian hackers may be trying to find a way into the classified military information that the Senate committee has access to. So far, Russian hacks into the electrical grid involve installing malware in the utility operating systems. According to the Department of Homeland Security, the Russians gained access to the grids by first hacking into the networks of utility contractors who have poor cybersecurity defenses. Now, I don't know about you, but the overall lack of alarm of what's happening with Russia is, to me, a little bit confusing. Washington occasionally gives it lip service, but are you seeing any concerted and coordinated effort to confront Russia on this one? The attitude is like, wow, this is bad. Whew, somebody should do something, huh? Yeah, you should be doing something. I'm telling you now, if this would have happened in the 1980s instead of 2018, where we don't know the difference between right and wrong, truth and fiction, I'm just saying, somebody might have said, I hit that button. There would probably be missiles in the air now. I don't want war, but I also, don't want a world without electricity. Wasn't hacking the number one topic in conversation in Helsinki? What happened there? If Congress was half as concerned about Russian hacking as they were about collusion, America just might be on the way of being more prepared to safeguard our next two elections, not to mention keeping, the lights and, hey, what do you say, the refrigeration on.
Glenn Beck.
TDS. Do you know what TDS is? TDS. I have TDS.
Trump derangement syndrome?
Yes.
I was going to say that can't be what he's referring to.
It is TDS.
Okay.
Trump derangement syndrome. They are now reporting that doctors are saying this is a real thing. It's a real thing.
Oh, I think it's definitely a real thing.
Oh, yeah.
It definitely seems like it's a real thing.
Well, it's a real thing by choice. I think it's a real thing by choice. You weren't born with TDS.
No, I don't think you were born with it. It seems like
you have to decide, I'm going to live my life this way. You do. Because there's no facts involved. Listen to this. Mm-hmm. Therapists across the United States say that ever since President Donald Trump took office, patients have been experiencing more anxiety, and it is affecting both Trump critics and supporters. Okay, well, that is not TDS. That is just, we're headed towards a civil war. We're not headed towards anything good here, and we all know it one way or another. This cannot last the way we're headed. It's just not going to last. Several therapists spoke to Canada's CBC News, saying that many of their patients have a fear about the country's future. Welcome to it, Democrats. Hey, we've been here for a while. We were here in the second term of George W. Bush. So think how tired we are. fear about the country's future, and if Trump will blow us all up. Okay, now that one, I mean, do you actually have that fear?
That Trump will blow us all up?
Yeah.
No, I don't have the feeling.
Not the way of like, I'm going to destroy America. But I mean, get us into a war and all of a sudden the missiles are flying.
I mean, yes. Yeah. I have some worries over that. I mean, I know people who love Trump might think that that's, there's a fear of that, I think, with every president. I mean, look at JFK almost did this, right? We were close with JFK. Every president, we have a giant military with one person, generally speaking, in control of the biggest weapons in it. And so at any moment, any president could make a mistake or do something wrong that leads to something like that.
Let me give you, instead of some sort of conspiracy theorist that, Donald Trump is he's just trigger happy. Well, let me show you a way that it could logically happen. Stu, what is China the most afraid of right now? What are they actually preparing for by 2020? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, you actually do, but you haven't obsessed on it like probably I have because I have a condition.
You do. It's not TDS. It's something else.
No, it is
something much more serious.
Okay, yes. So what are they doing? By 2020, they are going to have a social...
Oh, the social network thing, yeah.
Social media scores.
Yeah, social credit scores.
And what is that for?
I mean, to control their populace. Right?
Control the populace. It is exactly the thing that everybody saw with, if you ever watched Black Mirror, and you saw that episode where you can't travel, you can't get a car, you can't get a job if your social media score is low. You are trapped. That's exactly what this is. And at the same time, they are building these massive facilities. And these massive facilities are education centers.
Well, we should point out, too, because I think if you happen to miss this show that we did a few weeks ago when we talked about this, it's not like somebody's rumored to start this. This is a policy that has already begun to be implemented in China. They are actually so that means if you say something bad about the government, you would lower your social credit score. And if you do that enough, you would not be able to travel. You would not be able to get benefits from the government. You would not be able to get a job.
You can't have your children go to school.
Right. All sorts of basically to keep everybody in line, and it's a way to monitor them.
And it is already being implemented, and it will be fully implemented by 2020. That's according to President Xi. So, I mean, it's a done deal. It's a done deal. Okay. So they're afraid of their populace. Why are they afraid of their populace? They're afraid of their populace because they cannot stop growth. If they stop growth, people will starve. If their economy has a blip at all, people will starve, and they know revolution is around the corner. So they now have to get control of their people to know exactly where they are, give them all kinds of really bad punishments to make sure they all stay in line. They are afraid of revolution. What causes that a revolution? What causes that revolution is anything that hurts their economy. What hurts their economy? A trade war. We are playing with, and look, I hope this is a negotiation tactic. Now, Donald Trump has always said he believes in trade wars and that you can win trade wars.
And tariffs are great.
And they're all scientific and mathematical evidence, economic evidence shows that is not true. Tariffs are bad. Trade wars are bad. However, if he's just sticking his toe into the water and is using this as a negotiation, and he knows how delicate the economy is over in China, you're going to be okay. If he backs out at the right time and we get what we need and we've compromised and everybody walks away feeling okay.
And there's some evidence that he might do that, right? With the way he treated the Chinese phone company that was having issues. He went to bat for them. I mean, and because it was a big deal to China, and he advocated strongly to lift security recommendations from his own government to help their economy.
Correct. So what happens if we don't start this trade war? Trade wars are always the last stop before real war. Okay, there's a whole series of events that happen. It starts with a crash, and then you start messing with the taxes, and you start redistribution. Then you start blaming it on people outside of the country. Then you start protectionist moves. Then you start trade wars. And if none of those things work, the next step is war. So could Donald Trump blow us all up in that way? Yeah,
and that's not
plausible.
Not necessarily. I mean, it's a bad way to put it, right? It's not Donald Trump blowing us up. Like, you could also say that, this sort of more commonly referred to circumstance where Trump, with his sort of tough talk, sets, not because he's necessarily going to start a war, but because some dictator decides, like Kim Jong-un could have easily taken that the other way and said, well, screw you. If you're going to threaten me like that, I'm going to blow up South Korea. Mm-hmm. And it could have, it didn't. But, you push yourself closer to those edges. And anything like that doesn't mean that that's Trump's fault per se, in that, the person who fires the weapon is the one responsible for it, right? Just like in any other situation.
I'm trying to find a logical reason why you could freak out right now. Okay,
sure.
But those logical reasons are just as valid as it was when Barack Obama was cozying up in the Middle East through Benghazi, through the takedown of Syria, through the help to ISIS, and to the support of the Arab Spring. I could make a case, and did every night, that that's a very dangerous thing. That could upset the balance in the Western world, and it could cause all kinds of chaos in Europe, and it would cascade over here, and we're all screwed. That was really valid. It was not only plausible, it was possible, and much of it happened. But we're still here. The problem here is Trump derangement syndrome. People don't understand that it's the same thing that the right has been feeling. We felt exactly the way you do now under Barack Obama. The difference is you still have the mainstream media. You're already violent, and you still have the mainstream media batting for you. We didn't. We had no one standing for us. We had Fox and talk radio. That's it. And the mainstream media kept pounding us and wanting us, wishing and waiting for us to get violent. We never did. You still have the mainstream media, and you've already run to violence. And you're worried about all kinds of things that should be worried about by all of us. I don't want another war. And we're moving in the direction, but we've been moving in that direction for longer than Donald Trump has been in office. But you because there's no reason, because we're not using logic, because we're not using facts, you don't even know why you feel this way. You don't even understand that because you can't. Your reason centers shut down. It's a defense mechanism. When you're frightened, when you are freaking out, reason shuts down. Fight or flight. Well, we got to get everybody out of that because there are reasons to be concerned. But until we get out of this fight or flight, we'll never be able to see the real issues and be able to address them. Until people can stop saying, I've got to defend the president at all costs, from a group of people who say, I want to destroy him at all costs, we're not going to be able to solve what's really happening in Russia. And the threat is real.
Glenn Beck.
I'm watching The Handmaid's Tale right now, which, first of all, is really, really well done. I mean, it's a Hulu series.
Can you enjoy it?
You have to look past the idea that it is essentially feminist porn,
okay.
Right? It is like It's fear porn for feminists.
Right.
Like, here's the craziest thing. The reason why it's so popular, besides it being really well done, but it's super dark. The idea that this is a cultural phenomenon. I mean, every other scene is a sexual assault, and it's really super terrible, right? Horrible things happening throughout. If you don't know the concept of it, basically, somehow a civil war happened in the United States, and a religious fundamentalist group basically took over. I don't know if it's the whole United States or a big chunk of it. And
I think what happened was there was some sort of an outbreak, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was a decrease in fertility rate. So they had to basically take all the women who were fertile and make them just baby machines, right? So the elites are constantly assaulting the baby machines who are subservient. And the idea, of course, the reason why it's popular right now is, I can see this happening. Oh my gosh, Donald Trump wants to do this. This is what he's trying to plan. Like, that's what,
crazy.
But that's why it appeals, right? I know. And there's a long history of this, right? Like, you could go to Atlas Shrugged, is essentially libertarian fear porn, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing with Overton Window in a way, right? Mm-hmm. The book that you wrote. You go to Waterworld, is essentially environmentalist fear porn, right? All of these, Red Dawn. Right? There was an example of it then. Elysium, right? Is if you are afraid of capitalism, that you believe that maybe all the rich people will build a giant space satellite and they'll all live up there and we'll all suffer. That's essentially what it is. I mean, leave out the fact that in Handmaid's Tale, it's really amazing because here you have a bunch of people saying, oh my gosh, you know what? Donald Trump might do this. When they ignore the fact that society basically exists in several countries on Earth, which are almost never criticized by the left. And by the way, one of them in particular is a communist country. The same thing that essentially Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is rooting for the road to is essentially the Handmaid's Tale, right? I mean, you're telling me North Korea, Iran is another good example of this, where you have a society that runs somewhat similarly to what they're actually showing on The Handmaid's Tale, and it's occurring right now.
See, this is what I tried to say about a half an hour ago, that you don't even know what you're really afraid of. You are afraid of all these things, like Handmaid's Tale. Yeah. It's not going to happen in America. It's not going to happen.
No.
Now, could fascism happen in America? Yes. Could communism happen in America? Yes. Could we have civil war in America? Yes. Could we have an Islamic war and a possible takeover from the Islamic world? Unlikely, but yes, we could. So we have all these things to worry about, all these things and nobody's actually talking about the real issues. Instead, you'll run to Handmaid's Tale and say, see, this is the Trump America. No, it's not the Trump America. No, it's not the Trump America. And it's not the Obama America. Let's deal with the facts. Aren't the facts scary enough? Why do we have to go to these shows and watch this dystopian future when this one's pretty frightening in and of itself? Let's make sure that those things don't happen by dealing with the issues at hand. How do we have a civil war? How do we have a government that all of a sudden loses control and a bad government steps in? Well, I'll tell you, an easy path: lose your power. Oh, who's doing that? Is that in the news? Yeah, Russia hacking our power stations. What do you say we work on that one?
Glenn Beck.
I don't know about you. I don't know any reason why I want to run to the movie theater and just escape. I can't think of a single reason that makes you just want to turn off reality.
It's hard to be involved in it, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah. It really is.
Because, of course, I'm sure this is the same with you. Every time you go do anything else, everyone wants to talk to you about the news.
No, I don't really have any friends, so I don't.
Okay, no one wants to talk to you about anything. But when I go do things, they know you work at a show that talks about the news all the time, so they bring it up, just like you bring up their dentistry or whatever job they have, right? Hey, how the teeth?
How's the teeth thing working?
How's the enamel? I mean, is that big enamel day or
what is it that you do really? Because I just had my teeth cleaned and I went to the dentist and I only saw you for about 10 seconds. Somebody else did the x-rays. Somebody else cleaned. You just walked in, poked my gums with something, and went, you're looking good. What do you do all
It's kind of like if I hosted the show and at the end you came in and go, yep, you're right, Stu. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
And it's still the Glenn Beck program.
How does this work? I don't understand.
Right.
That's a good
The
point.
dentists have a great scam going on. But we digress.
You didn't think we'd uncover anything today. Well, we have.
We have. Yeah, we're doing our homework.
They're in the back with the nitrous. That's where I'd be.
Oh, I felt like such a wimp. I went to the doctor, and when I was a kid, I had a doctor with the old style. I mean, this is like, you have to go back to old movies to even see these, with the old style syringe that was in the metal. Mm-hmm. The metal body on it,
sure.
And the two big rings on the end. So he stuck a needle in my gums and then let go and was like, "Oh, I forgot something." And so the needle and the thing is just like
what?
Boing, 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 and snapped off. And so he had to go dig it out of my mouth. So anybody comes near me with a dentist.
What alley were you in at this doctor's appointment?
I know.
I bet you do know.
Yeah.
He left a needle hanging from your gums, and then it broke?
Oh, yeah, it was really...
I hope you got 10% off.
We still went to the dentist. It was in those days where we're not going to... Oh, it's just Bob.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Bob should not be a dentist, Mom and Dad.
No.
Anyway, so I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to be really, really cool. And finally, the nurse is like, "Would you like some nitrous?" And I'm like, "Yes, please. Yes, please." It is. I felt like such a weenie. You're cleaning your teeth. And
I am 100% on the nitrous bandwagon. This has been a huge change in my life recently. And, a lot of people come on the radio to talk about positive changes in their life. This is a positive change in my life.
It? Okay.
I'm doing a lot more nitrous. It's great. Right. No, every time I go to the dentist for any reason, I actually just really enjoy it.
I might stop by this afternoon just to make an appointment.
Exactly.
But I'll need nitrous to do it.
I know. Someone say that sounds like a drug problem. Right. It does.
It is.
It is.
But it's under a doctor's supervision.
Exactly. And here's the thing. I mean, because I'm one of the people who, I can't believe we're talking about this now. I had one bad experience at the dentist a long time ago.
Tell me about it.
Where just something happened and it hit a nerve and it really hurt really badly. So now every time I go to the dentist, all I think about is every single move in my mouth is going to recreate that reaction.
Right. Every time they come to me with anything in my mouth, I'm like, you're going to break that off in my gums.
Exactly.
Right. It's irrational.
Yes,
let it go.
Completely irrational. So I get nitrous every time I go to the dentist for any reason. And, 99% of the time it's, cleaning. Luckily, I've been to the dentist a lot, so I haven't had any tooth problems that are of any serious note. But even for a normal cleaning, I am absolutely on board. I don't wait until something happens. I do it right off the bat. In fact, I called ahead and I said, you know what? Just to let you know, I know you never do this for anyone else. And they give me the little wuss treatment too. They're like, wait, this is just a cleaning, right? I go, yes, I do. And you know what? This isn't covered by insurance. Yes, I do. Now bring out the drugs. That's what I say. And they roll the tank out there, and they put me under, and it's fantastic.
So why is nitrous
not more popular? I've asked the same question.
Right? Why?
And also I've asked. I may have done some research on how do I get a tank in my home. And
you might have done
that.
You might have.
And so here's the thing. Here's the issue.
How am I going to take it home?
Because I was thinking about it one day.
Right.
We had a group outing, a friend's birthday party this weekend. And we went out, and as adults tend to do, not included in this room, had a few drinks. And maybe a couple too many drinks on Friday night.
Right.
Saturday, I woke up and felt like hell.
Right.
And that's not a normal occurrence for me at this point in my life, but it does occasionally happen. And I got, this is what's so great about nitrous. You feel just as good as the greatest moment of that night drinking. In a half an hour,
you're driving
completely
home,
normal driving home. It's insane. And
Now,
I think that's also the downside of it, though, because the only, there's probably multiple downsides of it. Don't call me if you're some scientist. But one of the downsides of it is, 20 minutes after you pull this giant apparatus off your face,
right,
you're no longer anywhere near the great moments of nitrous.
Right.
Which, by the way, this broadcast brought to you by the makers of nitrous.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Today. But it's one of those things where it just fades so fast. It's not a particularly viable recreational drug. I have looked into this in that when you escalate usage, apparently, unlike all other drugs, you need more and more to get the same sort of level, and it becomes a little addictive. But the side effects apparently not that dramatic. And that's why it's a popular.
Now, I don't think you're thinking this through clearly enough.
Well, I am on nitrous, so I may not be thinking.
So you were saying, we went out. I mean, it might knock down some of the. I don't know. You know how everybody looks better when you're drunk?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Everybody looks better. I don't think wearing a little cup over your nose and having a hose and carrying around a tank in the back like you're an old man, is really that. Hey, so what's happening with you?
Well, first of all, this would not necessarily affect home usage. Let's be honest. Let's tell the truth. Let's tell the truth here. But I have thought of this. And again, what year is it?
Yes,
right? It's 2018. You're telling me we can't solve the face mask problem here? There's got to be a solution to that.
Right. Maybe you could just inject it.
This is again.
Right.
What if I walk around with a tank and a needle all day?
Right.
I mean, that would make this all the media stuff feel so much better.
I really wouldn't mind a life on nitrous.
It's pretty good.
It's
pretty good.
And what is really remarkable and kind of sad is that it does go away the minute you stop. You turn it off and you're like, no, don't.
Well, it fades slowly. And then you're a little bit I feel like I'm a little bit like cloudy. Like I wouldn't necessarily want to come to a show.
Yeah, I'm not going to operate a nuclear power plant, but I'll do this.
Yeah, I guess we just blurted it out. Yeah. Gosh, you guys aren't making any sense. What's the difference?
It's not like we're doing nuclear energy here.
Right. I mean, here's the thing. Most people, now sure, there's a television network involved, but put that aside for a moment.
Yes.
Most people hearing us right now are on the radio. Okay. Most people are taking in this show through audio only. They wouldn't be able to necessarily see a face mask.
No, but it might change the sound.
Well, no, it's going over your nose.
So, Stu, tell me about the debt problem.
Put it over your nose and try to do the debt problem joke. See?
Okay. Yeah, you wouldn't notice.
You wouldn't. I mean,
but you would hear. I mean, when I'm thinking, you would just hear.
It would be a little weird.
And it'd be a lot of those. There'd be a lot of those times on the air too, where we would both just be staring into space, and one of us would go, "Hey, wait a minute, what were we talking about?"
I'll remind you, this break started with something different. I brought up dentist, and that's how we got here.
I know.
So you're thinking it's going to be more coherent? I mean, I can't be less. There's a good chance we improve. Again, I drive better on nitrous.
We should try it for science sake to see if the show is better if we run nitrous. Oh my gosh, I think that would be dangerous.
That probably, I mean, I think
that would be dangerous.
We would need a chaperone. Because I think you're right. Someone has to have the power of just turning the mics off at some point. There has to be somebody in control. It could go really awry.
We should do this. This always legitimizes things. We should do this for charity.
Yes!
And raise money. How long?
Yeah.
How many minutes before the mic has to be shut off?
Oh, my God. That would be... Because I have the strangest thoughts when I'm in the dentist chair. I constantly
don't. I'm just...
You know, seriously, you know what I think about almost every time? I'm like, why isn't nitrous more popular? I really I want to start a business. I just want to get in this line of work. I don't know what it is.
The only thing that is thought to me was it makes your car go fast and it makes you feel this way.
Glenn Beck.
The best of the Glenn Beck Program.
Glenn Beck.
The best of the Glenn Beck Program.